Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Monday, April the 24th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We are also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined as always by producer JT. JT, how are you? Are you excited that we're finally here? It's draft week.
I know. It's super busy week for us. Specifically, we're doing a bunch of live shows this week, which
I
was
know.
not our initial plan, but here we are. So
Well, it feels appropriate. I mean, this
Yeah.
is the biggest week. We've spent the last at least 2 months leading up to this Thursday and Friday and Saturday.
We have.
So we're trying to make it as big a deal as possible, and we have got 3 more shows to do before we get to the live stream show on Thursday night, and we get to the actual draft, and we get to talk about what actually happens. We don't have to speculate anymore. So excited about that. Today is the first of 3 episodes we'll be doing this week. Today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And then Thursday, we'll be getting ready for the show that evening. But today's show, we have a special guest, a very friendly and familiar face. If you're familiar with this show at all, it's James Foster of A to Z Sports, A to Z Film Room, and the No Flags Film Twitter and YouTube accounts. James, welcome back, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. It's awesome to have you. And today we are live. So first of all, anybody that happens to be tuned in and watching, like Dorito Lover 101, who says, I love the Hot Read podcast. It's my favorite podcast that refers to a temperature. It's a very long list of temperature related podcasts. So we appreciate you putting us at the top there, Dorito Lover 101. If you are watching alongside Dorito Lover 101 and would like to comment today, please go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. You can find this live stream, and it's in the comment section of that YouTube video where you'll be able to interact with us. We would love to hear from you. But James, we brought you in today because we've got what I think is a really fun thought experiment that we wanted to do as we narrow in on the draft and get our last minute takes out there into the ethos before we actually get some results here. And we are going to be talking about 3 topics today. Okay, we're going to start with what I'm calling the replacements, and this is players that you can get later in the draft, the Kroger brand, the off-brand guys that are similar to more household names that you'd find in earlier rounds. So if you, for example, were dead set on, a JSN in the first round or a Paris Johnson Jr. in the first round, but you didn't quite get that guy, who can you get that is similar player prospect profile later in the draft for a discount? So we're going to talk through some of those ideas that we've come up with, and then we're going to take it even a step further and talk about what I'm calling the flip-flops. Okay, the flip-flops are guys who play the same position, and the expectation is for one to be drafted ahead of the other, and yet you think that the guy that's drafted later is just straight up going to be a better NFL prospect. The guys that you think the draft ranking are literally just backwards, and you think they should be flipped. So we'll talk about those second. And then third, we've got a fun little game to play with JT. JT's going to host and take us through a number of the outliers in this draft, because I don't know if you've noticed, this draft is comprised of a ton of physical outliers, both on paper from a measurement standpoint and athletically. And James, you and I are going to talk about whether or not we are in or out on betting on these guys to be the outliers in the NFL that we think they'll need to be in order to succeed. So we're going to cover all 3 in that order. Very excited because we've put in some time and effort thinking about some examples here. And without further ado, let's jump into the replacements. James, are you ready to talk about some discount guys you can get in later rounds?
I am. Let's see. Where do I want to start?
Yeah, you have the floor, sir. You can give us the first example.
I'm going to start at safety.
Okay.
It's a pretty weak safety class.
Yes,
but my replacement for Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M, who's currently my second ranked safety, would be Quindell Johnson out of Memphis, who I think is one of the most underrated players in this class. He's 222nd on the consensus board.
Where do you have it?
I would start thinking about him 4th or 5th round.
Okay.
4 consecutive starting seasons at Memphis with a PFF grade above 72, 60 tackles in each of the last 3 seasons. I watched him against if you're going to check out one game, check him out against Navy. He has this insane one-handed catch, one-handed interception, but makes some crazy plays on the ball. He has a lot of positional versatility. He's comfortable lining up in the slot, playing deep safety, playing a split safety look. He's a aggressive tackler. The one thing with Quindell Johnson, which is kind of similar with Antonio Johnson, is that they're a little bit stiff when it comes to side movement. And, I'm not exactly sure that either of them have the range to be like a center fielder and go sideline to sideline in single high. But if you're playing a split safety sort of defense like the Titans do, for example, I think Quindell Johnson is a great value on day 3.
I love that. And that's a guy that is an in-state prospect that I'm guessing anybody that's not a Memphis fan has probably not really heard of, frankly, because this safety class is from top to bottom a pretty weak class, but sounds like he could provide some value in later rounds. JT, do you want to go next? Do you have an example of somebody you think could be gotten in a later round to replace a guy you miss on early?
Sure. So the guy that's going to be highly touted in this draft, I went with Tucker Kraft, the tight end from South Dakota State. If you wanted to find a bargain bin guy that kind of plays the same exact game as him, I went with Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion. So basically why I did this is that they're both really athletic tight ends. They both tested really well throughout the entire the combine process and the draft process. Tucker Kraft really kind of excelled last year in a bunch of areas. His run block grade last year was really good at 69.6 PFF grade for 2022, and also was really good after the catch last year, ranking 20th in the nation in yards after catch per reception with 7.7 on average. Where I think you see Zach Kuntz do this is that he's also a guy that maybe the Titans could look to see like, hey, we want someone like a Kraft, but we don't want to spend the 3rd or 4th round pick on him. You might be able to pick up Zach Kuntz in the late 4th or early 5th round, where you find a guy who also was really good at run blocking with 67.5, but also has that versatility in the catch. He was on the tape that I watched, he was really, I liked his game a lot. He had 12 receptions on 28 targets for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. I feel like he'd be a really nice guy to slot in between Chig and the other guy whose name still escapes me, Jeff Swaim's replacement. But
yeah. We'll learn it eventually. I forget as well.
But he's someone that I like in the later rounds.
I like that. And that's a guy, I mean, Zach Kuntz is the consensus 122, whereas
122.
Yeah, whereas Kraft is 68. So it's a guy that if you're the Titans, you don't end up with a 4th round pick, which they currently don't have. You see them not get a tight end until day 3. If you're looking for a 5th round guy and you missed on Kraft, then I think Kuntz is a great example. The first example I have is in the wide receiver realm, and I'm going to talk about a Tennessee prospect here, Jalen Hyatt, who is the consensus. Let's see, he is consensus number 39 overall, expected to be a borderline 1st round, probably top end of the 2nd round draft pick. If you miss on him, and I expect the Titans to probably pass on him. I don't think that he's necessarily the kind of guy that they are going to want in the 2nd round. I would prefer them to take other guys like Josh Downs or Cedric Tillman. But one of the guys that they could take in round 2, but I think they could wait until round 3 to get if they don't get a receiver in one of those first 2 rounds. The bargain bid version of Jalen Hyatt that I thought of is Marvin Mims Jr., which is I don't know where I came with Jr., just Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma, who has been talked quite a bit about in Titans circles, but when you compare the two from a physical standpoint, their RAS scores very similar. Mims is actually more athletic according to the relative athletic score. He comes in at just under 6 foot, whereas Hyatt is just over 6 foot. Mims is slightly heavier at 183. Hyatt is 176. For as much talk as Jalen Hyatt gets for being like the burner in this class, Mims is just faster than him. Do y'all remember when people were legitimately talking about, Jalen Hyatt might run in the 4.2s. And then that never even came close to fruition. And so this guy
having a foot race against DeMarco Helms really helps out. Like
sure,
they get him matched up with those, slow safeties. Just like if it's Jalen Hyatt versus a random 3-star recruit from, Mississippi or something, I'm taking.
He's in like
Jalen
third.
Hyatt.
He's in third year. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. But Marvin Mims certainly that is similar to Hyatt. His official 40 slightly faster, just under 4.4, and Hyatt was at 4.4 flat. The rest of their numbers, broad jump, vertical, 10-yard split, 20, broad, shuttle, all of these things are very similar. And in a number of these categories, Marvin Mims is just the slightly more athletic player. Now, do I think he's a better receiver than Hyatt? Not necessarily. But if you're looking for somebody that plays a relatively similar role, is going to be a field stretcher, and you don't want to spend a first or second round pick on a Jalen Hyatt, I think Marvin Mims at the end of day 2, a round 3 pick, if you can get him there, which it sounds like teams aren't that crazy about him, even though the analytics community and draft media folks tend to really like him. From what Daniel Jeremiah has talked about, it sounds like for some reason teams just aren't crazy about Mims. So he may end up falling into day 3. Who knows? And if you can get him then, it's a ridiculous steal. So I like that bargain bin option a lot. James, who's your second replacement player that you can get in a later round for cheap?
So my second replacement player is going to be Joey Porter Jr., cornerback out of Penn State. My replacement is Rajon Wright.
I love this one because it's a massive difference, right? Joey Porter Jr. considered one of the 3 best cornerbacks in this class, a first round pick. Whereas, and how do you say his name? Rajon? Is that what you said?
Rajon Wright. Yeah.
Okay. Rajon Wright. I don't even know where he is on the consensus board. Do you have his number?
Yes. So he is 187 on the consensus board.
Yeah. Slight difference in these two guys, but you see a similarity to their play style.
Yeah, they're both really long press corners. Rajon Wright, if you watched, I can't remember which season it was, but he was one of the top players on the team for one of the seasons at Last Chance U.
Okay.
And his brother Nahshon Wright was way overdrafted by the Cowboys a couple years ago in the 3rd round.
Brothers Rajon and Nahshon, is that what you just said?
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Sure. I was not familiar with those two, but that's an amazing pair of names.
But, so when I got into Rajon Wright's film, I was kind of biased, or I guess I had low expectations because, his brother was just so stiff. Like his brother was a lot taller. I think he was Nahshon Wright is 6'4" or something, really just too tall to function on the outside.
Is Nahshon older? Is that why you had evaluated him?
Yeah. Nahshon was in the class of 2020, maybe.
I got you. Okay.
I remember he was like a Des Fitzpatrick kind of pick where he got drafted and it wasn't even people were saying, oh, that's a bad pick. He was 200th on my board. It's who is that? So yeah, I think I had some preconceived notions, but Rajon Wright is just so much smoother in terms of his footwork. He has enough short area quickness to recover when he misses with his hands, but he's got good length, good size. I think he has good speed. The one hang up with Rajon Wright is that we didn't get any testing for him. I think he's injured would be my guess. Usually why they don't test.
Right.
So there is a little bit of uncertainty there. And, I never, from the games I watched, I think I watched 3 or 4 games, and I never had, any concerns about the recovery speed. I have seen that as a negative on some people. So, there's always a chance that they just watch different games than I did. But, I think honestly, Joey Porter Jr. has a lot of talent, but a lot of issues that he needs to clean up, and he's pretty scheme dependent. And so for a team that needed a press corner, I could see myself pretty easily deciding to wait on Joey Porter Jr. And go with Rajon Wright. 11 pass breakups, 4 interceptions in the last 2 seasons. He's been a productive player, doesn't get beat that often. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Rajon Wright.
Where would you consider drafting Wright?
I have a late 4th round grade on him, and he's
And
my
from okay,
139th ranked player.
And I love this one because, again, it's another player that I think a lot of folks aren't familiar with. From a developmental standpoint, is he a guy that you think is more on the raw project side, might need a year or two to be a real contributor? Or do you see him as somebody that, even as a day 3 addition, could be a contributing factor to a team in year 1?
Yeah, I think he is. I think he will follow the normal rookie development track where like he'll
stink
he'll
for
go in
8 or
and
10
be,
games and then figure it out.
Not that great as a rookie, and then gradually improve, hopefully. Like there are some, he's an aggressive press corner, and so when he gets crossed up at the line of scrimmage, like you will see him get beat on quick slants, and he kind of needs to grab to throttle down with curl routes and stuff like that. A lot of the negatives that you see with any cornerback of his size. But if you're in the Rajon Wright, Joey Porter Jr., some other guys that we'll probably talk about market, Eli Ricks market, like,
yeah,
you have a scheme, most likely like a cover 3 scheme, where you're having your corners basically just move vertically down the field and, press, bail out to the deep third, linear movements. You're not asking them to just, mirror all these complex routes across the entire field. So I think it's a scheme. He's a scheme specific type of player, but I really do like Rajon Wright as a press corner.
JT, who's your next replacement option in a later round?
So my second one is, when I was thinking about this, it's more on like name value alone. With these two guys, I feel like we've heard a lot about his game and that he's going to go a lot higher than where his consensus ranking is right now. And one we really haven't heard of, and that's Jayden Reed is my maybe bargain bin Tyler Scott here. I've been on this train here a little bit that I'm not the biggest fan of Tyler Scott, but on the consensus board, they're not too far apart. Tyler Scott comes in at 76, Jayden Reed comes in at 92, but you just hear a lot of talk with Tyler Scott here about how he could go in the late 2, maybe early 3, where I think you can get.
Yeah. I think it's the same, a totally fair shot that he's gone before the 3rd round ever begins.
You can get kind of the same player who has a little bit more experience than Tyler Scott in the later 3rd. Jayden Reed is a guy that when we had Austin Gale on, he kind of put me on. And I've been watching a lot of his tape, and I've really liked what I've seen. Mainly, the difference between the two is the contested catch rate. I've really liked what I've seen from Jayden Reed with that 64.7% contested catch rate last year. Tyler Scott just didn't look as complete to me. And for a guy that's going in maybe like the 2nd round or so, getting a Jayden Reed in the 3rd, I would love that pick.
Well, and Lord knows Jayden Reed was playing with significantly worse quarterback play than Tyler Scott had to play with. I don't even know who played quarterback for Cincinnati this past year now that Desmond Ridder is gone. I have no idea, but I'm assuming they're better than Michigan State. Do you have an opinion on this, James? Are you even familiar with who played?
I was muted.
No, you're good.
I have literally no opinion. I have such tunnel vision when I'm watching these players. Like everyone's like,
oh yeah.
I remember last year, everyone's like talking about, oh, Jalen Carter's the best player on Georgia's defense. And I'm like, oh yeah, 88. I think I noticed him. But like, I have all the numbers of all the players that I need to watch, and I just get those down, and then I'm just tunnel vision on those. So you're
focused on this draft. You're not going to be putting out your way too early 2024 mock on Friday morning.
Oh no, I will not be.
The worst of all sports content. No, I like that one, JT. My next one is a pair of tight ends, a hot topic for the Titans, as they obviously need probably to add at least one more guy to that room. And these are two guys that are both within kind of our consensus top 5. We've talked about how this tight end class, there are 5 guys that are 1st, 2nd, 3rd round draft picks, and then a lot of guys that are probably more day 3 type grades. The one that came up for me was Michael Mayer, who's the consensus number 1 tight end out of Notre Dame, my number 1 tight end, obviously a very good player. If you miss on him early, and you've got a second round pick that you're willing to expend on a tight end, I think Sam Laporta is a perfectly good replacement for Michael Mayer. I see a pretty similar player in terms of the way that they were utilized in college. From a measurement standpoint, Laporta is actually a better athlete according to the RAS score, like slightly shorter, the exact same weight, give or take a couple of pounds, runs a 0.11 second better 40-yard dash. So he's a quicker athlete. He's got a better 10-yard split. And then all of his athletic testing numbers in terms of explosiveness, agility, the broad jump, vertical, shuttle, 3-cone, he's got significantly better numbers across the board than Mayer. Now, in terms of the way that they produced in college, Mayer's got the better tape for sure. But both guys are very often utilized, or were in college very often utilized in both the passing and the blocking game. They're do it both type players at the tight end position. And yet you see so many similarities, like both are very, very difficult to tackle. I mean, Michael Mayer is like a refrigerator with legs, and Sam Laporta is the guy that on the tight end episode with James a couple of days ago, we were talking about how impossible it is for him to get tackled. Apparently, they both have really nice hands for decent inline blocking tight ends. And I think that just from a physical standpoint and a play style standpoint, their games match up a lot. Is Mayer the more day one ready NFL prospect? I think so. I think he's got more polish than Laporta does. But in terms of their ceilings in the NFL, I don't see any reason why Sam Laporta couldn't be a second round pick that ends up having a better career than Michael Mayer if he were to go in the first. So I think Sam Laporta is a decent replacement option for Michael Mayer if you miss on Mayer in the first round. Do we want to move on to our last two here? I think both you and I, James, have one more. So what's your last replacement option?
Yeah, I'm going to actually do a double jump off of your answer.
Okay.
And I'm going to say,
I was hoping you might do this.
If you pass on Michael Mayer
and then miss on Laporta too,
Laporta, but then even Sam Laporta is a little bit too rich for you.
Okay.
You can go with Braden Willis, tight end out of Oklahoma.
This is like Coke and then Pepsi and then like Dr. Thunder. Like just
Coke,
off
Pepsi,
the board.
And then like whatever the name brand they come up with on like Nickelodeon, Mountain Fizz.
Y'all ever heard of RC Cola?
RC Cola, yeah. Sure.
Little
RC Cola, very mid drink. Yeah, but affordable compared to the name brand.
So Braden Willis to me is, kind of he's a budget version of Sam Laporta, except I think a much better blocker. Much better run blocker. 84.2, 80.3 PFF run blocking grade. The last two seasons, and that checks out on tape. I mean, he pancakes more people on film than I see from any tight end in this class outside of Tucker Kraft, but he was going up against basically third graders. Braden Willis is a less productive receiver, and he's an older prospect, but he can block on those split zone slice blocks. You can get him the ball out in the flat, and he can do some stuff after the catch. And, so he's pretty much the guy that I'm targeting. Like if I were a GM, 90% of drafts, I'm walking away with Braden Willis.
Where do you have Braden Willis on your board? Because this is yet another guy that you've brought up here that I think a lot of people aren't even familiar with. Where do you see him going in the draft?
I have Braden Willis at 187, late 5th round grade. My comp for him is Grant Calcaterra, and he's 311 on the consensus board. So yeah, definitely an under the radar prospect. I have seen him get a little bit of buzz on Twitter, but I would honestly be surprised if he wasn't drafted, because his take, he didn't play, he wasn't a full-time starter, but he played a good amount of snaps, but like the tape just doesn't lie with him. To me, there's no way that a team is going to watch his tape and think that there's 250 players better than him in this class.
That's fascinating. It sounds like the kind of guy that a Tennessee Titans team in particular would certainly be interested in for the blocking prowess. The last replacement that I have is a guy that I've kind of soured on a little bit. And I'm sorry to tell JT this because I know this is one of his guys that we came away from the combine and he was a big fan of. But if you are interested in an edge rusher with a lot of upside from a trait standpoint, maybe not the most productive in college, but somebody that on paper, this guy's got the build for it. You want to coach him up and you're going to take a risk on them to be a stud within their athletic frame. The first round guy is Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, who is the 15th consensus player overall, edge 3. I'm not crazy about taking him in the first round at all. I would pass. I think he's going to be a good player, but there's just a lot of question marks there. And he truly is only a first rounder, in my opinion, because of the freaky athleticism that he has. But the guy that I think has freaky athleticism that is also a project, and more of a project than Van Ness is, but a guy that I would much rather take a gamble on, is Yaya Diaby, edge out of Louisville, the 113th overall player. From an athletic standpoint, very similar. Van Ness is 6'5" to Diaby's 6'3.5". Diaby's 10 pounds lighter, but runs a 0.07 second faster 40-yard dash, has a better 20-yard split, a better 10-yard split, a significantly better vert, and a significantly better broad jump. So as an athlete, he's kind of all of the athletic prowess that Lucas Van Ness is, minus the, I guess, the polish or the attention. But while they both, for my money, didn't do enough on tape when I watched them to warrant a super high draft pick, with Diaby as a guy that's outside the top 100 on the consensus board, and Van Ness is considered a borderline top 15 player, I don't see why taking a shot with Diaby's traits, trying to coach him up and get him in the, third, fourth, fifth round isn't a better option than taking a gamble on a Lucas Van Ness in the first. James, what are I'm curious what your thoughts are on that comparison, and maybe just in general, Lucas Van Ness. Do you see him as a guy that's worthy of a first round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a tad bit lower on Van Ness than the consensus.
Okay.
Or at least, I have him at 25th, consensus rank 19th. So pretty much in that same general area. My comp form is Preston Smith. I think with Lucas Van Ness, I'm really valuing him highly in a defense like Tennessee's that runs a lot of stunts. If I'm a defense where it's just like rush 4 and we're going to let our guys, try to win with pass rushing moves, I think Van Ness absolutely has the traits to, develop into that type of player, but I don't know that you're going to really get production at a high level from day one. But when you talk about like just looping him on a stunt and the bend and flexibility and explosiveness that Lucas Van Ness has, I mean,
for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely, he's one of those players. There's a few players where you watch them and before I've even, done my grade or my evaluation, it could be like a couple drives into their film. I'm like, oh yeah, the NFL is going to love this guy. That's how it was with Lucas Van Ness, where like before I had even made up my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, he's going in the first round. And yeah, I mean, I think
it's kind of the same case with Tyree Wilson. Like just on paper, you're like, yeah, there's an NFL team that's going to just slobber all over this dude.
I think Yaya Diaby that's a good call as far as a budget version. A little bit more stiff than Lucas Van Ness, but
definitely
they're both kind of similar situations in college where they weren't really fully utilized as pass rushers. Obviously, Lucas Van Ness didn't start, and Yaya Diaby was kind of like the secondary pass rushing guy for them. Yasir Abdullah was actually their main guy as far as like production. But yeah, I'm a fan of Yaya Diaby. I have a early 4th on him, 88th ranked player in this class.
All right, so we agree. He's one of my guys in this draft for sure. Let's move on to phase 2 of today's episode, which is the flip-flops of the draft. And this is just taking the exact same premise one step further. We're trying to find the guys who play the same position, where one is considered a better prospect than the other, is expected to go well before the other. And yet we think that the lower ranked guy is just going to straight up be a better NFL prospect than the higher ranked guy. So, James, do you want to start us off? Who are two guys that you think should be flipped on the consensus board in terms of their value?
All right. I'm going to stay at edge rusher.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with, how should we phrase it? So the guy that I'm lower on is Byron Young out of Tennessee.
Okay.
And the guy that I'm higher on is Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State.
So Byron Young, the 89th consensus player, Nick Hampton, the 185th consensus player. Certainly a big jump between these two, but you think Hampton is just going to be a better NFL prospect?
Yeah, I do. I think,
and I like Hampton a lot. I think this is a good call.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Hampton, probably not on a lot of people's radars, but 95th percentile 10-yard split, 90th percentile 40-yard dash, 70th percentile on the vertical jump. And, he's an undersized player, but he actually has solid arm length for his size. And, just his explosiveness off the snap and variety of different moves that he's comfortable winning with. I think Nick Hampton is absolutely a player on late day 2, early day 3 that has, some real upside, more so than you're getting with a lot of players in that range. Byron Young, to me, I watched every Tennessee game, and
sure.
Then after the college football season, I start listening to draft podcasts, and I hear a lot of people talking about, like Byron Young. Oh man, I remember I heard this quote. Someone was like, I mean, what he put on tape is undeniable. And I'm like, really? I didn't notice that.
I think it's very deniable, actually.
And then I watched it, and I am kind of denying. Like,
yeah.
He was had solid production in terms of sacks, but it was a lot of stunts, a lot of unblocked stuff. That's really what his game is going to be. He doesn't really win with pass rushing moves, and he doesn't have the length to win with pass rushing moves. And he's an older prospect, but there are extenuating circumstances where it makes sense why he has, why he's as old as he is. Cause
sure.
He was, working at a grocery store, I think, or something like that. And then basically answered an ad to join Tennessee's football team. So late getting into football, and
right.
The development arc there with Byron Young kind of makes sense, but I'm going with Nick Hampton. I think he's even more explosive, and I think his pass rushing skill set is a lot more developed at this point.
I like that call a lot. And I mean, it's like 100 spot jump on the consensus board. And yet I think that Hampton is absolutely the more day one ready player at the very least. I see more polish with him, and I think the explosiveness is on par, if not better. So I'm with you. Shout out Stoney. See you in the comments. Appreciate you being here listening, man. JT, do you want to go with two guys who you think should be flip-flopped on the consensus board?
Yeah, so mine here, I'm going the edge rusher route here.
Okay.
A guy that I'm lower on is Tuli Tuipulotu, and a guy that I think I'm higher on.
The name. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I'm finally getting better at it.
Yep.
A guy that I'm higher on is Derek Hall out of Auburn. On the consensus board, they're not really too far between each other. Derek Hall is consensus 61. Tuipulotu is 59. But if you look at where they're currently listed, Tuipulotu is ranked as the fifth defensive lineman, where Derek Hall is ranked as the 12th defensive edge on the board.
Right. Edge is so deep that he gets pushed down. I mean, would you say he's edge 12 and he's the 60? So there's 12 edges within the consensus top 60.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, every 5 guys is an edge.
Their size is really comparable. Derek Hall is 6'3", 254. Tuli is 6'3", 266. So between the height and weight, they're not too far off. Tuipulotu wins with his moveset that he has. I think that's why he's a little bit higher. There's just a lot I don't like about his game. considering he had an over 30% missed tackle rate. That's just not something I want on my team. Derek Hall is someone who I'm betting on the traits that he already has, not to mention his speed. He ran a 4.55 40, which is in the 94th percentile at the combine and with all edge rushers. I think he is a guy that I could find myself being available in the mid to late third round, where I think Tooley is going to go in the late second, just because of where they're kind of how he's being talked about right now, which is why I'm going to take him. I'm going to bet on his traits that he has and the ability to kind of develop him.
I love that one. So my first flip flop here is one that I've kind of been beating the drum on for a while, and I think it's kind of the perennial example of this in this draft, or at least for me, if I were to put my money on one of these truly being a flip flop where the better player is drafted later, it's the Tennessee receivers. And I've been talking about this ever since we got into the receivers. I think that Cedric Tillman is going to just be a better NFL player than Jalen Hyatt is, despite the fact that right now on the consensus board, Hyatt is, and I'm realizing this is the second time I've talked about Hyatt today. I don't really mean to be dumping on Hyatt because I think he's a good player. I just think the guy that he played across from, Cedric Tillman, is going to be a better NFL prospect for, frame reasons, because of just the way that Tillman is built. He brings what is a pretty rare size element in this draft class in particular, with how small a lot of these guys are. Tillman's frame is something that's going to be coveted by a lot of teams. And I still think size, like big guys win in the NFL, so that can't necessarily hurt him. They're not that far off on the consensus board. Hyatt is like a round 1, early round 2 guy at 39th overall, wide receiver 5. The consensus wide receiver 7 is Tillman, who is 65th overall. So he's a guy that you could get in the second, maybe if you're lucky, third round. But like I said, and like I've said in the wide receiver episodes, I think Tillman is a guy that we're kind of sleeping on because it's not front of mind, right? Like his best season was a full season removed from that. We saw very little of him this past year. And what we did see was hampered by, injury and rust. And it just was not his marquee year. But based on what we saw from him in 2021, the 2021-22 season, his breakout then and the trajectory that he seemed to be on before that injury, I just think he's going to be a better prospect in the NFL. Part of this evaluation is the fact that I think Hyatt is a really tough NFL evaluation just from how he was utilized in college standpoint. I know we've talked about this and how Tennessee's offense is really not a real, like it's a fake offense. It's not real. It's not comparable to the NFL in any way, shape, or form. And Hyatt was used in a way that was particularly difficult to comp to the NFL. I mean, he's like being hidden as a fullback half the time in the backfield, avoiding contact and taking screen passes or running past guys on the outside like that. He's just used kind of in a gadgety way, whereas Tillman is a more traditional NFL receiver. So I expect Tillman to probably be a better NFL player top to bottom than Jalen Hyatt is. I'm just realizing I'm the host, so I should throw it to somebody else here. James, do you want to talk about your next flip-flop player?
Yes. Let's see.
You do not want to talk about it. We're done talking about it.
Pass.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go with, so the player I'm lower on is Julius Brents out of Kansas State. And the player that I'm higher on is Riley Moss out of Iowa.
I like this one a lot, but it is dangerous because I think Brents is firmly within potential Titan watch on day 2. Genuinely, he screams a Titans guy, a Chris Harris guy to me, and he's kind of right in that range they've been looking. So I would not be shocked at all if he becomes a Titan. But I'm Riley Moss.
I'm going through and updating a couple of these consensus rankings today for my board. And like, man, I've just realized I'm so much lower on Julius Brents than ever. Like everyone has him at 70.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding. It's literally like, there's probably like 8 outlets that have him between 67 and 71. So there seems to be a real consensus there. I have Julius Brents
234th overall.
Wait for it to load. I have Julius Brents 166th overall.
Ooh, it's very far. Yeah.
And he's 69th on the consensus
too
board.
far
So
off.
about a full 100 spots lower on Julius Brents.
Okay.
I'll talk about Julius Brents and then get into
I was about to say,
Riley
tell
Moss.
us what about Brents you dislike before you tell us what you do like about Moz.
Well, I think without the combine performance, and like if we're just judging based off of tape, I had a late 6th round grade on Julius Brents, and then he was a player that
grade. Woof.
He was a player that obviously the combine numbers, especially the 3 cone, were really impressive. And so,
right.
I will give him a bump for that because, whatever you want to say about combine testing, like you can't fake it. That athleticism is in there somewhere.
But I'm going to guess you're not bumping him from late 6th to mid 3rd because of a 3 cone time. Yeah.
I mean, I think, a lot of people kind of are overlooking with his athletic profile the lack of speed. The 40-yard dash time isn't terrible, but it's right on that edge, and you do see him get beat over the top pretty frequently.
Okay.
And his footwork is just a disaster. I mean, at the line of scrimmage, like he's jumping in all different directions, giving up easy inside releases, and then the elite,
like I said, perfect Titan.
The elite short area quickness just does not show up on
Doesn't
tape
exist.
To me.
Okay.
And then I think you watch all of his interceptions. None of them were even really great plays. They were kind of just the ball getting tossed to him, and it's just it's not a lot of consistent, like down to down, steady play from Julius Brents. There's, you watch him against Quentin Johnston, and there's some nice plays every now and then, but they're sandwiched in between like 2 or 3, huge plays where he got beat or the receiver dropped it or he gets a pass interference. He's a heavily penalized player in college. So for me, I think the existence of Tariq Woolen is really the reason that I'm even thinking about Julius Brent's early day 3, because Tariq Woolen's film wasn't good last year. Right. And that happens all the time where, players just, they're not getting maybe as high level of coaching as they're getting in the NFL, or there's something about the scheme that clicks with them. So players get better. And if Julius Brents can put it all together, then I think you're looking at a pretty special corner with crazy arm length. But 5th-year senior, that's, I don't know, the development track to me is just not that encouraging. For Riley Moss, I think, obviously as a white player, a lot of people are going to want to move him to safety, but he is a legitimate corner.
Sure.
I think he's at his best in a zone scheme not because he lacks speed, but because he's just so good at reading the quarterback's eyes and breaking on the football. I mean, I remember Riley Moss. I first found out about Riley Moss. I'm an Indiana fan. And, I think he had 2 pick sixes against Indiana in like the season opener a couple years ago. But yeah, he's been a productive player for Iowa's defense really for 3 years. I mean, he's played over almost 1,500 snaps. And in the last 4 seasons, PFF coverage grade over 75. I think that a team like the Rams, I had the Rams taking him in my most recent mock draft, a team that plays a lot of off coverage. He has short arms. That's kind of his major athletic flaw, but 97th percentile 3 cone, 92nd percentile 10-yard split. He really has everything athletically outside of length. And so I think an off quarters type of scheme where he can just, read his keys, break on the football, I think he'll have a lot of success.
Do you see him going on day 2, or do you think that he's going to be a day 3 guy?
I would expect him to go day 2. He has the production.
In any other
11
draft, I feel like it'd be an easy lock. It's
11
just
interceptions,
so deep.
11 interceptions, 20 pass breakups for his career. I don't know what his RAS is, but I have him at a 89.3 athletic score. So I mean, athlete with production. Yeah, I think he's a firm day 2 pick.
Do you suspect, like, do you have any idea why you think the consensus isn't as high on him as some guys? Like the fact that he's behind the Trey Tomlinsons, the Garrett Williams, the Darius Rushes, the KU Blue Kellys, Eli Ricks. Why is he on the consensus board considered one of the lesser guys in this really stacked cornerback class? Because all I'm hearing are great reasons to be higher on him. Is there a limitation to his game? Do you see anything that would keep him from being a useful day 1 starter?
Really, the one limitation is that he's not a press corner.
Okay.
So there's like that scheme. However, you kind of want to, for people that, do big boards, you're doing it for all 32 teams. So you can't really, it's a balancing act between different guys that are scheme fits, and
Sure.
they might not be on one team's board, but they might be a 3rd round grade for another team.
Right.
But with Riley Moss, I mean, he's 84th on the consensus board. I have him at 77. So, I mean, I feel like he's pretty accurately rated. The guys that you mentioned, Eli Ricks, I would strongly disagree with Eli Ricks being above him. But I think once all the boards get finalized, I don't see Eli Ricks being like a top 100 player on the consensus board, because
Okay.
just with his like 40-yard dash, honestly, I think when you see that on film, I remember watching Eli Ricks and like, man, he's so good in press coverage. But when he loses at the line of scrimmage, he doesn't have that ability to turn and recover downfield.
He's the anti-Caleb Farley. It's like there's no makeup ability, but he just wins with technique, prowess.
Right. Well, I mean, he just wins by like, dominant length and just being physical, an absolute dog at the line of scrimmage.
Right, right.
But so yeah, he's kind of a guy that might come in there, jam the team's number 1 receiver a couple times, get him roughed up, and then take him out. Let the guys with some jets cover them.
JT, who is your next example of a flip-flop player that you think is going to go later and just be better than a player at the same position that goes earlier?
So the player that I'm lower on is Kalijah Cansey from Pitt, who is consensus 626 on the board here.
626. Holy
yeah, right?
cow.
626
prospects.
Kalijah Cansey comes in at 26 on the consensus board. The guy that I think is just going to be better at the NFL level is Keanu Benton from Wisconsin.
I back this take 100%. I love this.
Kalijah Cansey is getting so much hype because of, I think, the narrative.
You mean the next Aaron Donald?
The next Aaron Donald narrative. If you look at his size alone on the defensive line here, he's 6 foot 5/8 inches, which is 2 percentile, 281 pounds, which is 4 percentile. But the big thing here is his arm length at 30 and 5/8 inch arms. It's the 1 percentile for all defensive linemen.
The 1th, if you will.
Yeah, the 1th, the 1st percentile. Sure. But however you want to say it.
I think it's the 1st, but 1th is more fun.
Yeah. If you look at a guy like Keanu Benton, it really is just the production level was very similar for these two guys, but with a little bit more size, coming in at 6'3", 309 pounds and 33 and 7/8 arms. He's a guy that I think just might have a better time from the start, just kind of acclimating to that NFL level. Kalijah Cansey's just arm length really just concerns me, man. Like it might, he's going to have to win all the time. Just
we may or may not be talking about him in a couple minutes when we talk about the outliers.
He may just have to win with his moveset alone rather than like just his physical traits. Whereas Keanu Benton, where he has to maybe develop a little bit more, he already has that physical ability, which is why I think you and I have talked about if there's maybe a guy in this draft, like a Cole Strange scenario happens where a guy from 50 plus comes down and comes in the first round, it could be Keanu Benton.
Well, and there will be one of those guys. I mean, like, just historically speaking, there will be somebody outside the consensus top, like 70. I think the past 6 years, we've had somebody out of the top 70 or 80 come in that first round. And I could see Keanu Benton. He's not that low on the board, but he's certainly not considered a first rounder. And it wouldn't shock me at all if somebody were to take a swing on him. I love that. I have more thoughts on Kalijah Kancey, but I'm going to keep them inside for just a minute because we are going to potentially talk about him when we talk about the outliers here in a second. My second flip-flop is along the interior offensive line front. And I'm going with two guys that I've been pretty low on and pretty high on this entire time. I think that Cody Mock, the do-it-all offensive lineman, played tackle in college, but I think maybe the only guy with true 5-position versatility in this draft on the offensive line. I think that he is going to be just straight up better than Osiris Torrance out of Florida, who is considered a borderline. If there's any offensive lineman that's an interior guy that goes in the first round, it's probably going to be Torrance. Whereas Cody Mock is considered on the consensus board 53rd overall, very firmly within that second round. I kind of think he'll go higher than that. I wouldn't shock me at all if he was gone before the Titans even drafted at 41. I could see him sneaking into the first round, definitely see him going in the second round, but Mock is a guy that I just love. That I can't get over the versatility. I can't get over the attitude. I think from a football player, mentality and attitude standpoint, Mock is the dude. And on tape, he his actions reflect that attitude that I'm looking for, that mentality. He's a vicious, violent player, very willing to learn, as demonstrated by the fact that he was moved all around the offensive line at positions that he didn't have a ton of experience playing during the Senior Bowl, and reportedly was having a great time and was super willing to do whatever the coaches needed him to do. Very jovial guy. JT, I know you and I enjoyed getting to watch him at the podium in Indianapolis, like a very fun guy to be around. Certainly somebody you'd want in the locker room. Now, that's not to say that Osiris Torrance is a bad guy. I actually don't really know anything about the guy himself, but as a player, it's another one of those things where I think that a number of teams are going to probably either take him off their board or have him lower on their boards, because if you don't have the right scheme, I don't see him being a super versatile scheme fit for teams that run different styles, certainly in the run game of zone and gap schemes. But Torrance, I've talked about this before on tape, I just was not impressed. I didn't see a whole lot besides just a domineering athlete kind of just being in the way, which worked for him a lot at Florida. But I'm not sure that in the NFL, the lack of physicality, the lack of dog that I just didn't see on tape is going to play very well for him. And with Cody Mock, like, he's just the counter opposite in terms of dog factor. I watch his tape, and there may be some limitations, and it may be true that he has a harder time just adjusting to the NFL speed, the NFL talent, because he is coming from a smaller school. But ultimately, I expect him to end up being a better player than Osiris Torrance out of Florida. James, do you have one more flip-flop for us before we move on to the outliers?
Yeah, so you said character concerns for Osiris Torrance. Got it.
He's total gas mask bong situation. He's I think he's way too into NFTs. Yeah.
But yeah, I co-sign the Osiris Torrance slander for sure.
I figured you might. Yeah.
Man, this is such a difficult decision for my final flip-flop.
Well, I have the two guys you're looking at here, and you can either choose to slander a guy that I really like or slander a guy that JT really likes. Or you can do them both. Right. If you want to double dip, be my guest, man.
All right, I'm going to go with the player that I dislike more.
Okay.
And so my player that I don't like is Blake Freeland.
Heck of it. I knew this was going to be. Yeah. Okay. All right. Tell me all about how my guy stinks at football.
My replacement is Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion. Blake Freeland is a tackle from BYU, for those who aren't aware. And so let's just start with the athletic traits, because they both have had really good testing numbers. So Blake Freeland is 6'8", 92nd percentile height. He's got a 97th percentile short shuttle, 92nd percentile 3-cone, and then his vertical and broad jump are 98th and 97th, 83rd percentile on the 40-yard dash. But he is very undersized, 307 pounds, I believe. And as a really tall player, he has an unfortunate build because he doesn't have long arms. So he's kind of getting the worst of both worlds, just in terms of physical stature.
Funny. There's no doubt he's built funny.
He has this upright, top heavy build, and his center of gravity isn't very low to the ground, and so
he's honestly like a kindergartner drawing their family, and it's like circle body, stick legs,
right,
stick arms.
Yeah, so it's like he's got the height, which gives him a lot of balance issues because he ends up on the ground a lot. And if there's one thing that I've learned after having Evan Neal as my number one player last year, and that kind of looking like a miss, is I'm out on offensive linemen that fall down a lot. Like last year, I remember watching Evan Neal and
high level analysis. Do not fall down on the football field. He didn't get
beat that often, but there would just be a lot of plays where at the end of the play, he just kind of gets tripped up and falls down. He probably averaged 5 or 6 falls per game. And
can you start?
I don't know. I think that really does.
I need to know what these prospects
speak to lack of balance.
Fall per game per capita.
Yeah, no. PFF needs to start charting that for sure. I think like I'm kind of being tongue in cheek, but Blake Freeland does like fall down a lot and get knocked over pretty easily.
It's true.
His actual anchor is better than I would have expected it to be as an underweight kind of guy.
Totally
but
agree.
Just like especially in the run game and like trying to get worked through traffic, get to the second level. Just not a very graceful mover when he's working through traffic. And I thought that the hand placement with him was really inconsistent. I thought it was just like a lot of out of control play. And then, the competition level, he's another one where the competition level is really hard because a lot of the guys that he was blocking later in the season, once they got into divisional or conference play, are not like high level pass rushers. But then you saw him against Baylor and against Oregon, like those were his 2 worst games from a pass protection standpoint. And they were, the 2 best competition. So I like Blake Freeland. Okay. I have him at 156 on my board, 127 on the consensus board. So, the traits, I understand it's a lot of like big numbers, but
yes, it is.
I don't know. There's not very many people with that build in the NFL playing offensive tackle.
I can't disagree with you on that front. Even though he's my guy, it would be kind of an outlier-y build for sure.
And then, so my guy that I like is Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion.
Okay.
I have him at 108 on my board. He's 137 on the consensus board. A lot of people are actually, I don't want to say catching up because it makes it seem like I'm not trying to say like I am like this.
Welcome to the club, guys.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like people
time.
You get to the players when you get to them, but like a lot of people are becoming a lot higher on Nick Saldiveri. He was also a really good tester, not off the charts like Blake Freeland, but 83rd percentile short shuttle, which is, the money drill for offensive linemen. And you really see that show up on tape. He has, whenever he's sliding, I mean, think about the short shuttle. It's like basically, getting into a pass set. He has, just such graceful movement, really quick, smooth pass sets. And he's always centered to the block. He's always centered on his assignment, inside hands, does a great job of, rotating his base around the pocket to make sure that he's in between the pass rusher and the quarterback. He played right tackle for Old Dominion, but a lot of people project him as a guard. I think he falls into the category where I saw enough at tackle where I would definitely want to try him there, but 33-inch arms is right on the cusp of being too short. But I think, he has just such a well filled out frame. I think he has the perfect build for a guard. I think he can play in a gap scheme, zone scheme, And the other thing with Nick Saldiveri is I think he does a great job of making up for not having the longest arms, because he's constantly repositioning his hands throughout the rep and, always working to establish perfect hand placement.
I like that one a lot. Saldiveri is a guy that I don't think we've heard a ton about, and you're right that people are just kind of starting to talk about him at the last minute here. Kind of funny how that works. The last pair of guys that I think are flip-flops in this draft, and this is another one of my guys versus a guy that I'm not that high on. If you're a fan of Miles Murphy out of Clemson, who is let's see, on the consensus board, he is edge.
He's the fourth edge overall, number 16 on the consensus board.
Oh, I've got the wrong. I'm looking at defensive lineman here. That's why I'm confused. Thank you. He is the fourth edge on the consensus board, and the guy that I think is going to have just a better career than him, 16th overall, by the way, for Miles Murphy, is the 32nd overall ranked player, Will McDonald, the fourth out of Iowa State. I've talked about McDonald quite a bit in past episodes. I think from just a pure pass rusher standpoint, he is a top 5 guy in this class. I see him as a guy that is worthy of a first round pick for sure. I don't actually dislike Murphy all that much. It just on tape, I got more flash, more pop with McDonald. And I feel like he's a little bit maybe a more polished a player than Murphy is. I also think that he might be a little bit more versatile because of that pure edge rushing ability that he possesses. But this is one that I would like to hear James's opinion on. Murphy and McDonald. How do you view these two players, and who do you think may be the safer bet in the NFL?
Yeah, so I have Miles Murphy as my edge 3, late first round grade on him, and then I have
You're higher on him than I am for sure.
Higher, you said?
Yeah, you must be if you have him edge 3, unless you have McDonald even higher than that.
Yeah, I have McDonald as edge 6, 26th ranked player. The big thing with Miles Murphy that that I keep coming back to with him is just the frame, and there really is. It's so hard to find a player that's 6'5", 271.
Yeah, great build. But that's kind of where the good things end for me. I just love the traits.
And what I will say about Miles Murphy is that I had a much, much lower grade on him until I watched the 2021 tape.
Okay. I definitely haven't tucked into that at all.
It's the exact same. It's the exact same thing with all of the other Clemson defenders. Brian Bersee for other reasons, and Trenton Simpson also. The tape in 2021 is just so much better than 2022. Back when they had Brent Venables, shockingly,
they were a better team that year as well.
He's a good defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think honestly, Miles Murphy, he doesn't have, this crazy pass rushing moveset. It's basically just like long arms. And then he'll swat the outside hand and get into like a speed rip. So he doesn't have a ton of different moves, but he is capable of winning in all 3 directions. He can get around the outside, he can do inside counters, and he can just go right through you. And then the thing with Miles Murphy that I do think stayed consistent is the run defense and the way that he engages with blocks, really quick hands, accurate, inside the shoulder pads. And he has this kind of like push pull move where he can just kind of dominate the blocker's balance and really move them wherever he wants. So with Miles Murphy, I think it's a bit of a projection. I think you've got to pay attention to the 21 tape, but yeah, the 2022 tape, it's just a lot of first move doesn't really work, and then the rush stalls and live to see another down. Will McDonald is like one of the freakiest players in this class. Just his athletic traits, his length and explosiveness and bend, the combination of those 3 traits, like those are first step, bend, ability to turn the corner, and then length. Like those are the 3 probably most important traits for an edge rusher, and he's elite in all of those areas. But third percentile weight for an edge rusher, he is purely a wide nine, just pin your ears back type of guy. He's not going to really give you a whole lot in run defense, I don't think. And a lot of his production, I thought maybe like won't fly in the NFL. It really just seems
I've not heard this. So like, elaborate on that. What do you mean?
Yeah. So a lot of it is like, he telegraphs a lot of his moves where he uses the spin move a ton, and these are all like technical flaws that he can fix, but these are just kind of, the negatives for him. He telegraphs most of the moves that he uses. Like when he does a spin move and then they'll chop down with that opposite hand, he comes in with that chop hand. Like he comes in leading with that chop hand. And it's like, I feel like a good offensive tackle is going to be able to pick up on that and just slide inside. And he doesn't really have a consistent way of generating power as a pass rusher. And for me, I just, every year I always like fall in love with all of these speed rushers and the bendy guys and all of that. But when you look at the players throughout the NFL that are, getting high level pass rushing production, it's mostly power rushers. It's mostly guys above 260 pounds. So like the Will McDonald archetype of pass rusher has not been proven to be a consistent like number one pass rusher. It's more of a number two at this point. So I like everything about Will McDonald's game, except for the way that Iowa State's defense was playing him at like 3 technique.
Right.
But there just are, the weight is just kind of the main thing that's keeping him towards the back end of the first round for me.
So let's move into phase 3 of today's show, which is the outliers in this draft class. And we've got roughly 10, I think, guys here that I've listed, that JT and I have listed, that are, for one reason or another, a significant outlier on paper. And so we'll get into that in a second. But we got a question here for James from our guy Kenneth that I think is worth talking about here. And I'm going to kind of rephrase the question a little bit for our purposes here. But when talking about the outliers, we can talk about 2 of the biggest outlier traits in 2 of the best quarterbacks in this class, 2 guys that are being talked about quite a bit as potential future Titans if the Titans choose to move up for a quarterback, or if one of these guys just happens to fall into their laps. But with Anthony Richardson, a lot is made about the completion percentage and the accuracy concerns from college, at least on paper. And with CJ Stroud, a ton in the past like week or 2 has been made of the fact that apparently he's a big dumb idiot quarterback who has no ability to process anything because his S2 score is in the tank. Now, there's been good reason to indicate in the past, like literally 48 hours, his S2 score is not nearly as bad as folks have made it out to be. The actual people that run the tests, the people that own the test and have the actual scores, because it's HIPAA medical information. They can't release all of these scores, or else they like the way that the S2 test even works is they have contracts with 2 of the 4 teams in every division to give them a competitive edge. Like that's the whole point. It's a supply and demand thing. If everyone knew the scores, then they wouldn't be paying for the product. But what concerns you about a quarterback prospect more, James, when they were not the most accurate in college, or if they, show you something on tape or give you an indication that maybe their processing speed is a hindrance or has a hard ceiling on it?
So that's a tough question. I think that, I would say that athleticism, obviously most of these things can be improved on, throughout an NFL career, but I think accuracy, I think of as more of a skill, and the ability to perform and, operate an offense under pressure is more of a trait. I can't really think of there's no quarterbacks that come to mind that were bad under pressure in college and then became good under pressure in the NFL.
Sure.
And as far as
until
like
Will Levis,
as far as fixing accuracy, Josh Allen is really the key example of someone completely, like just going from an inaccurate quarterback to actually being pretty accurate. But you see a lot of like marginal fixes. If you go from a C- to a C+ accuracy, like that's still an improvement. So it's like I think it's going to be easier for Anthony Richardson to fix the footwork issues that are the root of his accuracy problems than it's going to be for CJ Stroud to improve under pressure. And I think that CJ Stroud's issues under pressure come down to the processing. That is part of it. And like, I remember noticing that from his film, that, he was kind of, when the first read wasn't there, as it, so often is in the offense, his speed, going to the next read definitely needs to improve. But to me, the most concerning thing about CJ Stroud under pressure is that's where you really see the limits to his arm talent. When he's out of the pocket and he's not just from a perfect like 7-on-7 base, and he's out in the pocket having to get rid of the ball from awkward arm angles, he's not really able to put that extra juice to get it over the linebacker, or the velocity isn't there and people are able to undercut the throw. So you combine that with the fact that when he gets out of the pocket, the decision making also, kind of goes in the toilet. Like, I think those are the things that to me have me more worried about CJ Stroud, under pressure than I am about Anthony Richardson's accuracy. Now, when you combine Anthony Richardson's accuracy plus the fact that he's barely started any games, that's another outlier factor. So when you combine all of that, I think Stroud and Richardson are pretty even prospects to me, but I really do think there's a significant bust factor with both of them. And as for the S2, I'm waiting for the S3 to come out. I'm not. I'm not
getting S2 either. I'm going to wait for the 3. Maybe I'll get the 2 when it's cheaper. Great answer to a very good question from Kenneth. Appreciate that. Someone get James his crown. That's right. Draft King. We're going to talk about 11 guys and then get out of here. JT, I have listed for us, and I would appreciate it if you would be so kind as to run through these names and numbers for James and I. And then we're going to approach this kind of from a team building standpoint. James, you and I are GMs. We're having to consider these prospects, all of them outliers for their size or their athleticism, one way or another. Do we or do we not want to take a risk on these guys being, outliers in the NFL, being successful outliers? So we're going to play a little game of in or out. JT, take us through these guys, and James and I will explain why we are either in on them as an outlier or out on them as an outlier. Let's start with this first guy. And you are muted.
It's a great one.
Go.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's start with the outlier of all outliers this draft season, and Bryce Young. He's the consensus overall number 1 prospect and QB number 1. He is incredible in college, but his measurables are questionable when it translates to the NFL level. He's 5'10" and 1/8, which is the first percentile, and came in a 204 weight, which is 6%.
Yeah, a fake 204.
Are you guys in or out on Bryce Young?
I gotta speak my truth here. I'm out. I think Bryce Young's gonna die in the NFL. I think that he might be really good for like 3 or 4 years, and then I have zero faith that his body's going to hold up. I would be out on him as a GM. I just this week have moved. Again, speaking my truth here, I think that Richardson and Stroud are both better prospects in my eyes than Bryce is, and it truly is just the size. Like, from a day one standpoint, I expect Bryce to be the superior quarterback, but I just don't see any longevity to that size, so I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, he's my number one overall player, so I think I have to say
It'd be hard for you to be out on him
Yeah,
if he's your number one
but
guy. Yeah.
like I 100% agree with your concerns about the size. I mean, like these are huge people in the NFL they're gonna be hitting him, repeatedly, and I just don't know that his body can hold up. But I think purely on the field, like he is the best quarterback prospect comfortably in this class. Processing ability is off the charts, and you read some of the stuff that people like Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah have said about Bryce Young, about like his process and how involved he was with the game planning, like at Alabama. I think I'm just so confident in his decision making and what's going on upstairs. And
me too. I just think he's gonna die. I don't think it's gonna matter.
And just gotta invest in the offensive line, I guess.
I mean, like if you could ensure me that he never gets touched, then I'd change my opinion entirely. But the problem is he's
I will say, if I had the number one pick this year and I had the option to just trade it for the number one pick next year, I would do that. Like I'll take
1,000%.
I would much rather have, or even the number two pick. I would honestly like
May or Williams
right now. I would honestly take Drake May over Bryce Young. I think if he was in this class, I think I would have a higher grade on Drake May.
And it's a perfect draft cycle take, because this grass is always greener on the next year's draft class. So I'm sure we'll find reasons to like the 2025 guys better than Drake May a year from now.
Let me give you some pushback on that though. People say this all the time. They're like, oh, everyone always says the next year's quarterback class is going to be better. No, they don't. They said that last year because the quarterback class was dog
for
shit.
Sure. Yes.
Okay? So they said next year's class. Last year, all you heard was next year's class is going to be better because it objectively was.
Yes.
And then this year, you really don't hear that many people definitively saying next year's quarterback class is going to be better. Now, the top two guys might be better.
I do all the time.
I haven't heard anyone say next year's quarterback class is better. Like
the number of times I've heard people consider like, yeah, we're bad and we need a quarterback, but just tank again and go for Cade May next year. Hey, Texans, you're a bad team. Just be bad.
People are saying they would rather have the first pick, the quarterback that you get with the first pick next year, than the quarterback you get with the 12th pick this year. They just want better players. Like it's not about the classes.
We're seeing different things then, because I'm seeing people that are just like, I think all these quarterbacks are flawed. I'll go with next year's guy. And I'm with you. Like last year, for sure, when people said next year's quarterback class is better, they were for sure correct.
I agree with the sentiment. I think it's kind of,
it may be overblown. That may be fair.
I think it's a little bit overblown.
Yeah. No, and I think that's fair. That like it's not always the case. It's not always like it may be the case that people are always saying it, but it's true a lot of the time. Like oftentimes it is better next year. And tongue in cheek aside, I actually do think next year's quarterback class will be better, because you've got two guys that are already like certainly not generational talents, but like they both have less flaw potential to me, significant flaw potential than pretty much all the guys in this class. Let's move on. JT, who's the next guy on our outlier list?
Some guy we already talked about, Kalijah Cansey, the consensus overall 26th prospect, the defensive lineman number 2. Of course, during the combine, he has drawn a lot of Aaron Donald comparisons coming from the same alma mater. He comes in at thank you, Stoney.
Stoney said he's out until 2029, but also he's drinking an entire bottle of Chardonnay, so don't trust him.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Which is maybe the most Stoney thing I've ever heard. I love that.
Comes in at 6 foot, 281 pounds. Once again, the big thing with Kalijah Cansey, 30 5/8 arm length, which is the first percentile, but his speed is something that we haven't seen in a defensive lineman. Not something we see all the time. A 4.67 40, which is the 99th percentile. Are you guys in or out on Kalijah Cansey?
James, what do you say?
So I assume all of these players were saying in or out based on where they're expected to get drafted, right? Like,
yeah. If you're a GM and you've got the opportunity to take him around where we're expecting to take him, are you in or out on that guy?
Yeah, I would definitely say out. I agree with most of what you guys have said about Kalijah Cansey. The biggest thing that a lot of people are leaving out when you make the Aaron Donald comparisons is the length, and Kalijah Cansey just doesn't have that ability to separate himself from blocks, and so his only option in the NFL is going to be to win early, like win immediately with that first step, which I think he can do. I mean, I think he can come in and be a productive pass rusher immediately, because his twitch and explosive first step is rare, and that lack of size actually does play to his advantage in some points, because it's difficult for blockers to latch onto him. But I don't know that I see him. Well, I think it's very much a question whether or not he can be a 3-down player, because
yes, I'm with
him trying to
for
anchor
obvious reasons.
It's just he's tiny. So
I'll keep it brief on this one. I'm out as well as a first round prospect. I just you are banking on him being Aaron Donald, which length differences, which I think are totally fair aside. Even if they were identical built guys, I would still be out, because I just don't see that body type working for anybody but Aaron Donald in the NFL. Who's the third outlier, JT?
Next up, another defensive lineman here, Nolan Smith from Georgia, the consensus overall 17th prospect. He's the consensus edge number 5. Also considered a bona fide round 1 pick in most people's mock drafts. He, on his mock draftable web, comes in at kind of like a 10:30 on the clock. So
10:30 clock, yeah.
The athletic freak, but he's got a really small frame. He comes in at 6'2", 238 pounds, which is the second percentile, 32 5/8 arm length, and also had a very impressive 40 time at 4.3940, which is the 99th percentile. 41.5 vert as well. So the dude's got hops, and 128 broad, which is the 95th percentile. Are you guys in or out on Nolan Smith?
James, I'm in on Nolan Smith. He's the third edge on my board. I think that he's going to be a stud. And the reason why I'm in on a guy like him with a smaller frame and out on a guy like Kalijah Cansey is with Smith, he's an edge player. If he just doesn't, if he can't cut it from a length and size standpoint on the line, just make him an off-ball guy. Like, is there any reason why he couldn't be a stud off-ball blitzing linebacker, James?
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Okay.
I think that he has that built-in floor, which is that you have a backup plan if he fails at his first position to kind of keep yourself occupied for the rest of his rookie contract,
Right.
And then get 2 years and he doesn't work out at edge. All right, let's start the off-ball linebacker project. But no, I mean, I think, really the negative with Nolan Smith to me is just arm length and size. And as far as run defense, he was one of the best run defenders in the SEC.
Yeah.
Throughout the last couple years in college. So I think that you expect some drop off when he gets to the NFL, but I mean, I don't expect him to go from like a game-changing run defender to a liability. And I think what you get in terms of character with Nolan Smith, like someone that can come in and be a captain of your team from day one. He has so many different ways to win as a pass rusher, even though he doesn't get that many opportunities to show it. It is there, on top of the explosiveness, the speed, and the bend. So yeah, I'm in on Nolan Smith. After those top 2 guys, I think it is kind of just a cluster. And like if you're a team like the Eagles and you wanted to take Nolan Smith to learn under Hassan Reddick, I think that's a great fit.
JT, who's our next guy?
Next guy up here is DeJuan Jones. He's the consensus 43rd overall player, offensive tackle number 6. Our friend who is, I think, still in the stream here, Stoney Keeley, gave him the comp of DeWandre the Giant. So he's going to have to collect his royalties on that one, since we've been using it a little bit too much. But his measurables are crazy. 6'8 1/4, which is the 97th percentile, 374 pounds, an 87 and 7/8 wingspan. Just absolutely monster of a dude. Are you guys in or out on DeJuan Jones?
So he's cut in. I'm in too. So it's kind of the opposite of the guys we've talked about, because he's certainly not lacking in size. I guess the question here is, despite the fact that he didn't, I don't know if it's unfair or if it's even fair to say he didn't produce a ton in college. Just like it wasn't the most impressive tape of all the tackles I watched. James, why are you in? Because for me, it's as simple as big guy, hard to get around. Like,
yeah,
just in
the way that I think about, offensive tackles in terms of pass protection is, can you stop people from going through you, and can you stop people from going around you? He can stop people from going through him, obviously. Bull rushing him goes pretty much nowhere. And then he has that snatch trap technique where when the pass rusher is over leveraging and, basically relying on DeJuan Jones to support their weight, and then he just snatches them at the wrists and slams them on the ground. He does that more than any college offensive tackle I've ever watched. And his hand placement when he's making pass rushers pay for overextending like they always have to do, his hand placement is so much better than you normally see with tackles with long arms. A lot of times people get infatuated by length with offensive tackles, but length is pointless if they don't know what they're doing with their hands. Like if you don't have any hand pop or control of your hand placement, the length is pointless.
Right.
But DeJuan Jones has that. So like he has not only 36 plus inch arms, but he's in full control of where he's putting his hands and what he's doing with them. And then, you combine that. So I think going through him is just like doesn't happen. And then when you think about going around him, he has slower feet than the average offensive tackle, but
he's 400 pounds.
Him, you have to take such a wide angle that a lot of times you're kind of taking yourself out of the play.
It's the scenic route. It's impossible to get around him in enough time.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, like when he's blocking a speed rush, he has his hand on the pass rusher the entire time. Like he has so much reach and range that he can constantly, have contact established and slow down the pass rush and, keep his own balance, keep his own positioning. So yeah, I'm so in on DeJuan Jones. I think like the idea, I don't know that I've seen this like said a lot of times or anything, but like, I feel like there's kind of this idea out there that he's just this, stiff, lumbering, guy that's just big, but doesn't offer anything outside of that. I think he has legitimate pass pro skills. And, I think as a run blocker, he's obviously really powerful at the point of contact, but he can actually get out on the move and, has some impressive body control on reach blocks. So yeah, and what Kenneth mentioned, that is literally like my biggest negative with DeJuan Jones. And it's nothing specific like to him. I'm not sure if he's had issues with maintaining weight, but whenever you get these huge offensive linemen, there always is that risk. Like that's just not really a natural weight for,
a human being to be.
So like, it's not, the other body parts aren't really built to.
Turns out we aren't built to be 400 pounds.
So yeah, you have kind of you have like potential injury concerns. And like that's the biggest issue. He former basketball player, the movement skills,
which is hilarious to me. Did you go find any of his basketball tape? Like when you heard that, no, I have to go do it. You have to see this man play basketball. It's astonishing. But yeah, that's literally the reason. Those are all the same reasons for me. I think that he's just so big. He's hard to get around. It's really just the size. Now, I'm with you that the size can be a concern. He's one of those guys that I can't wait for his career to end. Hopefully in 12 to 15 years or whatever, we get to see him in that picture. I forget who the former Panthers lineman is who we saw a picture that was like astonishing of this offseason, where once you're no longer a lineman, that shrink down that you get sometimes where it's like, holy cow, that dude played, he was a 350 pound lineman. Like DeJuan Jones may just be built to be a refrigerator. Like, I don't know, or he might be the craziest shrink down we've ever seen of any guy. JT, who's our next outlier?
Next up here, Peter Skoronski, the consensus overall 11th player on the board, offensive tackle 2, but mainly seen as the consensus best offensive lineman in the draft. But of course, he has concern due to his size. He's 6'4", which is the 8th percentile. 32 and a quarter arms, which is the 4th percentile. So that's where a lot of people are concerned. Can he play tackle, or is he just going to be a really good guard at the NFL level here? Are you guys in or out on Peter Skoronski?
I'll go first and be brief, James, because I've beat this dead horse all months long. I'm in on Skoronski. I'm not to be a total hypocrite on, well, this guy's, athletic or physical shortcomings I don't care about, but this guy's I do. I do care about his shortcomings from a physical standpoint. Like, I think there's totally a possibility that in the NFL he can be a much better guard than a tackle. The reason why I think he is deserving of a shot at tackle is simply because on film we have seen him go up against NFL caliber pass rushers for multiple seasons now, and he wins. Like, it's what he does against these dudes who are now in the NFL succeeding as edge rushing, pass rush stars. These guys come into the NFL and they succeed right after they fail against a guy like Peter Skoronski. That is enough to tell me this guy deserves a chance to be the outlier of outliers at the tackle position.
Yeah, I would probably say in on Skoronski for different reasons, I guess. Okay. I don't really see him being a tackle. I think that even on plays where he doesn't necessarily get beat, you can really tell that it's all he can handle to like stop this Nebraska edge rusher, that's like established first contact and hitting them with the long arm. And it's like, he does a good job anchoring, but you shouldn't even be needing to anchor against these guys.
Yeah.
I think once you get up against those elite athletes, like a Myles Garrett that's got 35-inch arms, and he's, like scraping the ground with his helmet and then getting into a spin move. And like, I don't know. I struggle to see Skoronski really holding up athletically with, some of the best pass rushers, on the edge. But I think this has been said so many times, but if he doesn't work out at tackle, I think he's a top 10, top 5 guard. And so however you want to value that, I think that's kind of a teens pick to me. But yeah, I think, mid to late first round is where I would be in on Skoronski.
All right, JT, who's our next outlier?
Next up, we're moving on to some wide receivers here. Jordan Addison is the consensus overall 23rd player, wide receiver number 3 on the board. Comes in at 5'11", 173 pounds, which is the 3rd percentile. 30 7/8 arms, but did have a pretty decent 4.49 40, which is 56th percentile. He has a 34 vert and a 122 broad jump. Are you guys in or out on Jordan Addison?
So for this one, James, I'll let you go first, but like, just to set it up here, the question is not whether or not he's going to be or is a good receiving prospect. Like, I think we both have him firmly within our top 5 receivers in this class. The question is, does he deserve the first round consideration that he's getting?
Yeah. So I would say, I think if we're talking like late back into the first, I think yes, he does. But in general, I would say like I'm kind of out on Jordan Addison. And it's tough to say because I think depending on where he goes and what his role is going to be, I could be in on Jordan Addison. But to me, he's a slot only. I think he's one of the worst out of these top receivers against press coverage. You watch him against Stanford. Caillou Blue-Kelly was tossing him around like a rag doll at the line of scrimmage. Like, just one of the most blatant examples of bullying that I've ever seen.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think that he can play on the outside. I think that he has natural he has natural separation ability. Like he's really shifty and does a good job, setting people up at the top of the route and stuff. But I do think that he needs to improve the tightness with his footwork and, the production with a better quarterback in Caleb Williams went down. And that was not a result of him not being featured in the offense. You watch him, there's a lot of times that he's got a cornerback plastered to him because he wasn't able to get any separation at the line of scrimmage. So he's right on that line for me of in out. I have him, I think 29th on my board. So
yeah, I'm out on him. It's a positional value kind of thing, and not even positional value, just draft value. I would not consider him in the first round. I just think that there are better. Now, if there's a run on receivers in the teens and I'm in the 20s and need a receiver badly, like I don't hate the idea, I suppose. I just don't love him enough to take him over 2 or 3 or 4 other guys that I think should be getting first round consideration ahead of him. I would certainly take the top 3. I mean, like Zay Flowers, I almost said Cedric Tillman, although I would consider Cedric Tillman over him. And then JSN and Johnston. I think all 3 of those guys are certainly people that I would consider in the first above Flowers. And it's really because Flowers, that size is so limiting. I think that he's probably slot only as well. Maybe can be an effective flanker in the right system, but I need you to be a better explosive top end speed acceleration type athlete if I'm going to consider you to be, at that size, a first round draft pick as a receiver. And he just simply is not. So I'm out on him. JT, we've got a couple more. Who's our next guy?
Next up here, Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback out of, I believe, Mississippi State.
Mississippi Flat Stanley himself. Yeah.
Yeah, right. He is kind of just like a 2D paper man.
He is
the consensus overall 31st prospect, cornerback number 5. So he could be a late first round pick, but what is really concerning is his weight. He's 166 pounds, which is 0% on mock draftable. Are you guys in or out on Emmanuel Forbes?
James?
You're letting me get all of these first.
I'll go first. Listen,
go first.
He's one of my guys. I love Emmanuel Forbes. I'm in on him, and it's kind of like I'm just doing this with his weight. Like it is concerning. But the tape, the dude is a stud. Ball tracker. He's great at the point of attack. I think he led the SEC in pick sixes in the past 2 seasons or in his college career. He's a dog on tape. He is a Flat Stanley 2D human being. Like he is living in just 2 dimensions. And the size is certainly concerning. And with that frame, like I'm sure teams have some idea of how much more weight they think he can carry, but you just look at him, JT. I remember seeing him in Indianapolis and being like, yeah, that frame just like it makes sense. You look at him, why that's all the weight he plays at and all the weight he carries, because that frame just is not built to carry a lot of weight. It allows him to be really fast and it works as a corner, but I guess durability is the biggest concern, as well as his ability to, against some bigger bodied guys in the NFL. You wouldn't necessarily want him going up against your DK Metcalfs and AJ Browns from a physicality standpoint. James, are you in or out on Forbes?
Yeah, I'm out on Emmanuel Forbes.
No, okay, why?
My 51st ranked player, 9th ranked cornerback.
Okay.
I think for me, a player with that extreme, a player that's that extreme of an outlier at such an important, trait or, athletic
measurement,
trait, like weight,
right?
You've got to be really pretty much perfect in the rest of your game. And I just see so many issues with his balance and footwork. He's got actually good length. And so I think he kind of ideally projects as a press corner. But in college,
against small guys,
he was really jumpy at the line of scrimmage. Got shaken off balance really easily. And he's one of those players that kind of, drifts along with the route stem at the break point. So like when the receiver's running a dig and they're going upfield and then the receiver cuts inside, he's going to keep drifting vertically for a couple steps before, whether it's reaction time or short area quickness, he allows a lot of separation on those, quick route breaks. And I think the fact we didn't get any, let's see, did we have any like shuttle? Yeah. So that's another thing is like, anytime there's a player that I have like worries about stiffness or hip tightness or anything that that the short shuttle and 3-cone might point you towards. And then you look at their athletic profile and they did the 40, they did the vertical jump, they did the broad jump. Oh, looks like they forgot to do the 3-cone and shuttle. Just, it's kind of like,
they must have just missed that station out there. Yeah.
So I think that if you're going to play him in press, you've got to kind of like remake his footwork and just teach him to be patient at the line of scrimmage. And then, some other issues with Emmanuel Forbes that I'm more willing to kind of set aside. You'll see him get beat when he's trying to jump a route. With Emmanuel Forbes, I'm fine with that because he more than makes up for those times that he gets beat with big plays where he's, jumping a route and getting a pick six. So that's the sort of thing that you just live with. For me, it really is just short area quickness and explosiveness.
JT, next guy.
Next up here, Tyree Wilson, edge out of Texas Tech. He's the consensus overall 8th player on the board. Edge number 2. He's very attractive on paper. His size is crazy. He's kind of like the Trayvon Walker of this class, but production in college is a little bit suspect. He's 6'6" in an eighth, 271 pounds and 35 5/8 arms. Are you guys in or out on Tyree Wilson?
I'm out on Wilson. And that's simply because he's become this like going to be a top 10 pick kind of prospect in this class. And I don't see him as that bona fide blue chipper worthy of a top 10 pick. It's too much of a project for me. It's too rich for my blood. I love the measurements. Well, how can you not? I get it. I understand the allure, but from a tape standpoint, from a polish standpoint, from a pass production standpoint, I don't get it. James, do you?
Yeah, I think that I might disagree with kind of the way that a lot of people view Tyree Wilson, but I would agree with the fact that I'm out on him. So I think he's kind of a different, just a different type of player than Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker has, to me, still the ideal build for an edge rusher because he has that size and length, but he's so fluid turning the corner and he's basically just no pass rushing skills, but the perfect set of traits for a pass rusher is Trayvon Walker. With Tyree Wilson, I actually don't view him as just this, ball of clay that you can mold into anything you want him to be. I think there are real limitations, with his ability to bend. I think there is some stiffness there. You saw good production from Tyree Wilson. I mean, 50 pressures, 8 sacks last season. But when I was going through his tape, I got a few games in and it's like, man, 90% of this guy's good plays are just him dominating a tight end. So it's like, I think the flashes of dominance are exciting. I'm not sure that I
question the quality of that dominance.
I'm not sure I expect him to be able to beat tackles one-on-one with a pass rushing move. Like, I don't know that he can do that from day one. And, he's a player that's had a lot of experience, was not particularly good until his final year in college, and has had 2 foot surgeries. So,
injury risk. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
If we're talking like Atlanta at 8, I think that's where they pick. That's fine.
Yeah, it is.
That's perfectly fine. Tyree Wilson is 10th on my board, so that's a good pick. But if we're talking 2 to Houston, that would be a Trayvon Walker level reach to me.
So you're saying Titans at 11, incredible value. They should go with Tyree Wilson.
Oh yeah, and I will become a Chiefs fan.
Okay, JT, who's the next guy?
Next up, we have another wide receiver here, Tank Dell, the consensus 78th player on the board. Wide receiver number 11, Nathaniel Dell, also goes by that. He's 5'8" and 3/8, which is the third percentile, 165 pounds, which is first percentile, and his arm length isn't much better at 30.5-inch arms, which is 14th percentile. Are you guys in or out on Tank Nathaniel Dell?
I will keep this perfectly short and sweet. He is too small and too unathletic. Hard pass.
So I'm in on Tank Dell.
Please, convince me. I want to be convinced. What is there to like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's probably the best route runner in this class, I would say. I think
wow.
It would be between him and Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I was about to say.
And Jigba's route running skill is pretty much only in like the short to intermediate areas, running 7-yard out routes and stuff like that. Sure. Tank Dell can cook corners with post moves, deep outs, pretty much like every route on the route tree. And his release at the line of scrimmage is insane. Like, he is literally untouchable at the line of scrimmage. A good contrast between Tank Dell and Jordan Addison, and an example of why one really small receiver could be, I would view them as a slot only, which is Jordan Addison, and Tank Dell, another smaller receiver, I think can play on the outside. I think he can be a Z. And I wouldn't really worry about him against press coverage, because honestly, his size makes it difficult for corners to get their hands on him. He's so twitchy, just with those quick body movements at the start of the play, and the anticipation of what the corner is going to do with his hands. He can make the corner miss with his hands and then get upfield quickly, and then, really crisp route breaks. And just one of those players that you watch and you can tell he just has that natural ability to separate. And so I'm in on him as a third round pick, I think. But he is a very risky player just with his size.
Can I play devil's advocate very, very quickly, James? And I'm not trying to trap you here, but you talk about a guy like Emmanuel Forbes at 166 pounds, and you're out on him because of that dramatic size shortcoming. We've got a guy that's a pound lighter in Tank Dell playing opposite him on the line of scrimmage, the receiver. What is it about Tank that you're in on despite the size, whereas with Forbes, you're out because of the size?
Well, so like I said, it's and we can add Bryce Young to this group. If you have one of these extreme athletic, you're an extreme athletic outlier in weight, let's say, you need to be a really clean prospect in every other area. I think Bryce Young is one of the cleanest prospects in this draft outside of the size. I think Tank Dell is a really clean prospect. I think he's one of the best pure separators in this class. He just happens to be really small. And so that size is going to knock his grade down a little bit for me, but I'm still buying into the talent. With Emmanuel Forbes, you got the size, but then I think the balance and footwork is just too out of control for me. And so as you start to stack up those major negatives and red flags, that's where you become out on a guy.
Hey, good answer. I will take it. I'm not happy about it, but I will take it. JT, we got 2 guys left. Is that right?
Yep, we got a couple of short kings here to round out our short king spring on this episode here. Let's start with the cornerback Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, who apparently is now going by Trey Tomlinson.
Yeah, I found that out this week. I don't know why. I think the long name's cooler, but it's whatever.
He's the consensus 96th prospect in this draft class. He's cornerback 14. And you may have heard of his uncle, LT LaDainian Tomlinson. So he comes from a pretty athletic family here, but he is 5'8", 175 pounds, and 29-inch arms, which are all below 5% on Mock Draftable compared to other cornerbacks. Are you guys in or out on Trey Tomlinson?
James, I want to hear you go first in this one if you've got a strong opinion on him.
Yeah, I would say that I'm in on Trey Tomlinson.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure where he is on where did you say where he was on the consensus board?
He's 96th.
96. Ooh. Yeah, maybe I'm out on Trey.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought I was in on him. I mean, he has
risen quite a bit in the last like week or so. He was not within the top 100 last I checked. So I think
he's an
his stock is
example of
rising.
like this is my least favorite thing about this draft process is like having to just so many good players that you have to put these qualifiers on with size, but
and super relative qualifiers. Like I'm so sick and tired of being high on a guy and then looking up and suddenly being low on a guy because everyone else has moved around you. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Trey Tomlinson has really, really good tape, a lot of ball production. His anticipation and the way that he can drive on the ball from off coverage. I think he can be a really good, or I should say a solid slot corner.
A useful slot corner, perhaps.
Oh yeah, maybe useful. Yeah.
Super useful. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I didn't see a top 100 player on tape.
Agreed.
So yeah, that I didn't even realize that he was that highly.
He's actually one spot ahead of that. He's 95th on the.
Funny thing about today, Trey Tomlinson though is that I had watched him probably a few months ago, and then I was going through Dane Brugler's draft guide the other day, and what I do is basically go through and just find players that he has, draftable grades on that I don't have in my database, and there were like 4 or 5. And one of them was
it. Dan Brugler, the guy who covers like 17,000 players
in my database.
Year?
Not that I haven't watched all of them, but just like make sure I've at least got every guy in my list,
even aware of their name. I got you.
Because there's no, for people who don't know this, there's no just centralized database of every player in the draft. You kind of have to do a lot of searching to get it all organized. But anyway, so I'm looking through and I'm like, dang, he's got this Trey Tomlinson guy ranked high. I can't believe I watched TCU's defense. I watched Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. I watched all these guys on defense, and I forgot Trey Tomlinson. So I'm like thinking Trey Tomlinson is this guy that I need to watch. And then I get to their defense. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah.
Same dude. Gotcha. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Trey Tomlinson though?
This is the first one where I don't have a strong in or out take. Like admittedly, I did not watch a ton of him since he's cornerback 14 or 15 on the consensus board. Like I kind of perused his tape more than watched it, but from what I saw from a highlight standpoint, didn't really wow me. From a measurement standpoint, obviously there's concerns there. So I'm just meh on him. As a top 100 player, I'm out. If he's there in the third round, still kind of rich for my blood, but fourth round, I wouldn't hate it. So yeah, that's it. I guess I'm out, but I'm not strongly out. He's probably just a dude to me. He's a jag.
He's probably the cornerback with the most dog mentality in this draft
at that size.
Because you have to. And of course he had the ball production, but when I talked to him at the combine, like dude just went up there at the podium and he's like, he was so feisty because he has to be. Everyone's going to doubt his size, but he had that ball production for a reason. Final
Richard,
guy.
Dr. Knockers wants to know how many we got left. Last one.
Final guy.
This
Final
is the last
guy. And maybe the shortest guy ever at the combine. Maybe
I think he was literally the shortest ever. Yeah.
Deuce Vaughn, running back out of, I believe, Kansas State.
K-State. Yep.
Consensus overall 146 on the board. Running back 16. Comes in at a 5'5" and a quarter with 179 pounds to his name. Are you guys in or out on the explosive small running back?
I'm out on him as a top 150 player. It is as simple as at that size weight combination, his play strength is not good enough to be a 3-down back to me. I don't think you're going to want to use him in pass protection at all. From a receiving standpoint, very short arms, very short guy. You're going to want him to go up against the very worst linebackers in coverage, and that's kind of the end of the list. And then from a running standpoint, he's built, I guess, well from a leverage standpoint to work in between the tackles as well as outside, but his top end speed is limited because of his height. His play strength is limited because of his size. Like there's just too many limitations to his game that all revolve around that really small frame.
Yeah, I'm also out on Deuce Vaughn. It's so hard with a running back where weight is probably the most important athletic trait that you're looking for. Like,
yep,
hitting that 215-pound threshold for running backs is kind of one of the major, out that and like arm length for tackles are kind of two of the most definitive cutoffs that I have. And
Stoney says he could have 150 draft picks to himself and not spend it on Deuce Vaughn. So we know Stoney's out.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say as a general manager, I would be out on Deuce Vaughn because like at some point it has to stop. Like at some point you're just too small to play in the NFL.
What is the limit? There has to be a limit somewhere.
And like I'm kidding, but honestly, watch him like try to pass protect. He cannot. Like
he can't. No.
He'll put up an effort, but it's like a little kid, running up and hugging his dad after he gets.
There was an attempt. Yeah.
So, I think the running back skills are there, like the vision, the footwork, and he doesn't actually take too many huge hits. He's so small that he has this way of kind of, slithering through blocks.
Dudes just do this over him and they miss.
Yeah. But when you look at the running backs in this class, like I'm going to take a real running back before I take Deuce Vaughn. Like
Deuce Vaughn, not a real running back.
But you know what I mean? Like someone who can play a real running back role in the NFL.
Yeah. And there are so many dime a dozen guys with that prototypical build, like the 6 foot 205 you can get in the 5th round. Why?
Right.
Has 1,000 career rushing yards. Why would you not go with that over Deuce Vaughn? Is my question.
Like I would take Deuce Vaughn for free. He's a good enough player, I think, that I would like want him to be in camp and like.
Okay, you're not going to give him the goodwill, but you're not gonna pay money for him. Yeah. No, I'm with you. All right, that's it, fellas. This is our 2-hour mega draft primer is what this turned into, and I loved having this conversation. Appreciate James being so generous with his time. James, thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody in the chat who watched live. Appreciate you guys. Real quick before we go, the only thing that I need to remind folks of, besides the fact that we've got 2 more episodes coming up on Tuesday and on Wednesday, we'll go through the top cornerbacks in the draft, and then we'll go through my mock draft 3.0, my final guess as to my futile guess, frankly, as to what in the hell is going to happen in this first round. No one knows, which is what makes it so fun. And you'll want to tune in on Thursday night to all that fun as JT and I go through the draft with you guys, and we are reacting live to everything that happens, including when the Titans draft. And I would tell you to make sure you tune in for the Titans at 11. But frankly, I feel like there's like a 30% chance they actually pick at 11, that they're going to move up or down. I just don't know where. So you're going to have to tune into the whole thing just to be sure that you catch that, because there's a chance we're talking Titans at 3 and 10 seconds into into the stream where they're on the clock and you're missing it. So make sure to be there. Appreciate you all doing that. So draft live stream Thursday night and Friday night. Make sure to check that out. James, before we go, tell the people they need to check out of yours as they get ready for the draft here in a couple of days, because we know you've got fantastic content out there that they can be binging.
Yeah. So I'm going to follow up that announcement by saying that you should tune into my draft stream. Hey, just open me up on a tab. That's all I'm asking. Just like give me the view. Like you don't even have to. You can have me on mute. I don't care. But yeah, I'm going to be streaming the draft day 1, day 2, breaking down every pick. So definitely check us out there. And got about 50 to 60 full scouting reports up on A to Z Film Room YouTube channel. So whoever the Titans pick, most likely I've got a video on them, and go check that out.
Awesome, man. All right. We appreciate James being here. JT, as always, thank you for being here. We'll talk to everybody the next 2 days. Hopefully you tune in for those episodes, and then tune into all of the local draft. Who needs the national draft stream on Thursday night when you could have the local folks giving you the insight that actually matters? You want Mel Kiper telling you about how great Will Levis is for the Titans when we can tell you about how this is a total and utter disaster? That's the more accurate information. So make sure to tune in to the local guys And see, bingo, Dr. Knockers here has got 2 monitors for this exact reason. We appreciate you, Richard Dr. Knockers, which is a fantastic name. For James Foster and for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you guys later this week.